Otto and producer Nicole O'Donoghue to take some questions. So Gracie, from the initial meeting at Cannes, and then we see, I guess, the next day, more or less, or at least that's what it looks like. How quickly did you know that you had a feature documentary in front of you with Michael?
Well, I guess when I first met Michael, it was just a lot of fun, and he was kind of taking me out to all these places. And then he invited me to London, and Greta Skarkey, who's in the film, is a family friend. And so I went to visit her, and she gave me his book, Empty Seats, which is an autobiography he wrote in '84. And so I read that, and I was like, wow, this guy's actually pretty prolific and incredible. And then about 6 months later, I went back to London to ask him if I could make a film on him, and he kind of reluctantly said yes, and that was kind of how it all began.
And for somebody like Michael, who is an impresario and who is used to sort of directing folks and sort of making things happen behind the scenes, how difficult was it to not let him sort of take over, as it were, and keep your hold on what you wanted to do within your film team?
It helped that we were in Australia. Yeah, it helped that we were far away in Australia with time zone. No, he also, I mean, yeah, you forget sometimes that he's a producer. I think for about a year we kept on telling him we were nearly finished when we hadn't even started editing. Because, yeah, and he was kind of saying, no, it should be 60 minutes for TV, and no, it's not going to be 90 minutes. And even recently with, like, he's been in hospital and he couldn't make it to the London premiere, but we went, I went to the hospital and he had all the reviews lined out on the bed, and he, got someone to go pick everything up. So he's very, he's onto it.
Right.
Yeah.
How is his health now? Is he doing better?
Yeah, he's a cat with like 45 lives. Like, he was really sick in February and then just again now. And then, like yesterday he did an interview. He was on the, we said, I texted him and said, someone wants to do an interview with you. And he kind of called and said, I can do it at 8 o'clock, and got his son over to help him on the phone. But he's onto it. Like, he called me this afternoon to say, like, the screening on tonight. He's got it all written down.
Love it. One last thing for me, which is, so you've seen the film, obviously, by this point. So what's his general reaction? Did he have notes for you? Like, how did he feel about it overall?
Yeah, I mean, I think Michael was great, actually. He sort of, I think, when we thought we were close to a fine cut, that we would enter into the London Film Festival last year, Gracie sort of flew to LA and took that cut and showed him, and it was sort of terrifying. But
I'm sure.
He never really sort of had any major feedback, and then we took it to London Film Festival, and he came along, and we were doing a Q&A much like this afterwards, and we were sort of looking for Michael. We knew where he was sitting, and he'd already left and gone to the after party that we'd organised for him. So he, I think he's really likes the film. And
excellent.
Yeah,
I'd love to take some questions from the audience, if folks have them. Don't be shy. That's why I start off, so we have some icebreakers. Any thoughts? I'll keep going, but please, So one of the things that struck me this time, sort of watching it again, sort of from the wings over here, was, you revealed, it's obviously about him and his entire life, but then you sort of wait till the very end, close to sort of talk about his very early life, which I guess I'm just curious about. Sort of, had you always thought about including sort of the stories about him at school that early on? I mean, earlier in the film, or was it always sort of structured in the way that you had it?
Well, we worked with Karen Johnson, who was this great editor in Australia that Nicole, introduced me to. And she, I think she kind of came up with the idea of putting it at the end because she felt that people kind of knew more about him then to kind of care instead of throwing it at the start. I think that was just a decision we made along the way. We kind of had a lot of cards on the floor for a long time. Yeah.
Right. Questions? Yes, please.
First of all, congratulations. And I think I have two questions. How long did it take for you to do the whole movie?
I met Jesus on a plane coming from Rio, so thanks for coming. I took, I think 3 years. I met him in 2010, kind of started end of 2010, 11, and then finished 2013, and something like,
Second question. Did this movie affect the Lorenzo Olivier Award for him?
Well, I think, I mean, obviously he totally deserved an award in his own right. I mean, I know people have obviously seen the film, so it was good timing for us that we were able to put it in at the end. Yes, I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, no, I think she's been gracious. I think that, like, yeah, we the film screened in London in October 2013, and it was April 2014 that he got the award.
Yeah, but it was...
I really think it probably really helped, kind of bring awareness back to Michael.
Yeah, and he was really like not. I thought when I saw him in LA, it was the last time I'd see him, and then I came back to Australia, and one of his friends kind of called and said he's getting the Lifetime Achievement Award, and then he's there in the wheelchair, and it was like he was no stopping him. He was like out of the hospital and back to London.
That's excellent. Other questions? Sorry, I can't.
Up here.
Oh, sorry.
Are there Is there a longer cut of the film where you like have more footage of some of the other shows, like more of his flops or more of his like middling successes?
No, but I mean, some of the shows that we would have loved to put in, we either like didn't get access to interviews with people, and there was so much. Like he did over 250 productions, and there was interesting stuff with like Joe Orton and Loot, and then obviously like Chorus Line would have been great to like elaborate more on that. Yeah, so no, it's like hard to kind of jam someone's life into 90 minutes. But
Were there folks that you particularly wanted to include, but just either had to sort of let go of it, or you couldn't get access to them for whatever reason?
Yeah, I think there was 65 interviews and maybe 52 people in the film or something, but we kind of had to cut out a whole chunk of his career at the end. So that was the kind of unfortunate decision for some of the people we interviewed. But it was good because interviewing some of them, either introduced us to someone else or taught us about him in another way. Yeah.
And was there anyone that he was like, I don't want you to talk to?
Yeah, I think he said Robert De Niro, but that was it. So I don't know.
Other questions? We have time for maybe one or two more questions. Yes, please.
How hard was it to trace down some of the interviewees?
Well, Nicole did quite well with Yoko. I mean, you can tell the story. Well, basically we're in Sydney, and I think Nicole and I just started working together, and she said, come in and let's go through who you want to interview. And we were like, oh, Yoko Ono. And she's like, I'll just go on IMDb and, call this number. And then we just called, and this person picked up after like one ring, and it was like Yoko's office or whatever. And then, yeah, like about 12 hours later, it was all kind of, Nicole organised it all. And then I came over here, and I didn't have one friend in New York. And I arrived, and I had to try and find a location for Yoko. And then it was kind of over the Easter weekend as well. And they said they'd come in and mount an artwork. Because I said, oh, it's a really white wall and everything's really colourful. And then I came in, there was this like little white canvas that they'd mounted. But it's very Yoko, so.
Definitely. That's great. Maybe one more question? Anyone? Yes.
You really get you need to open up. Was that a process that developed as the film went on, or was he kind of one day on, one day off?
Yeah, I mean, he'd always tell me stuff as soon as I put the camera away and zipped it up in the bag and like put it in the back seat. And then he'd be like, I just smoked a joint coming down this hill with Jack, or, something that, and I'd just feel like, oh, that's so annoying. But yeah, it took a while for him, because it took me a while to realize that he only wanted to do interviews in the afternoon, and his peak hour was like 4 to 6, but trying to shoot him before the sun went down if I didn't have lights. And then we obviously developed a quite close relationship, during the course. Like we had, I think we probably had like 2 major fights, but that was all happy families now.
That's good. In terms of his photography, I mean, obviously he was sharing his archive with you, which was only really seen by certain select people in the past. And I know there were pieces maybe in the Huffington Post or whatever that were run of some of his photos, but has there been plans of putting them together in publications and things like that you could speak about? Do you have any plans along those lines?
Yeah, one of his friends who's in the film, Miriam, is kind of putting together a book of his collection of photographs. He's got over 30,000, so I know she's been going through all the older albums that haven't been scanned. So hopefully maybe something in the next year, because they're kind of amazing photographs. We've got so used to them. You always forget until someone hasn't seen them for the first time. You're like, oh yeah, that's just like whoever.
Right. I want to thank you so much for bringing the film to DOC NYC.
Yeah.